Mediterranean, Greece, and Rome. That's what we'll be going over. We'll be looking at the Persian tradition, patterns of Greek and Roman history, Greek and Roman political institutions, religion and culture, economy and society in the Mediterranean, and toward the fall of Rome, which will also be discussed in chapter 5 as well. All right, the Persian tradition. All right, here's a map of the Persian Empire. Cyrus the Great establishing that empire by 550 BCE. They're also going to come up with the religion of Zoroastrianism, which again will be mentioned in chapter 5 and a little bit in chapter 6. It's a major enough religion to mention. It's not part of our major 4 religions that we cover, but knowing a little bit about it and it occurring and dealing with the spirituality, and also the fact that it's going to be coming up against the borders of India as well, and affecting parts of the northern part of the Middle East here. Okay, looking at the Persian Wars that occurred in 490 and 480 BCE, this is going to be your fights between the Greeks and the Persian Empire. It was started all over the Ionian area along the Anatolia Peninsula here, which is present-day Turkey. And what ended up happening is the Persians were pushing over. The Athenians sent aid over. That ticked off Cyrus, and then of course his son Darius, and then of course Xerxes will be involved. And that's where we start getting into the movie 300 with this whole conflict between the Persians and the Greeks. Sparta and Athens, who when things are fine between Persia will be at war with each other, but for the aspect of the Persian War will team up with each other to defeat the Persians, and the Athenian army will become extremely strong during this time period. You'll also get the Delian League, which is formed by Athens, and a lot of your Greek city-states are going to follow in Athens. Of course, this will also cause a war between Sparta and Athens with the Peloponnesian War here. Greece, its history will start with Crete. It's not on the map. It's the larger island down here in the south. The Greeks, you'll have Indo-Europeans who arrived. Again, that migration that came as they migrated their way to India, people would stop along the way and settle. And they arrived by 1700 BCE. You have the Mycenaean by 1400 BCE. It's destroyed by 800 BCE. We're going to lose a lot of information here with the Greeks, and then they will be rebuilding. The Olympics, you'll have a religious zeal here for the games that are for the gods, more or less. And then city-states, this is going to be a huge focus of Greece, having our independent city-states. They'll have differences in their cultures, they'll have differences in their politics, while still calling themselves Greece. They will never become an empire like you'll have with the Roman Empire or anything like the Persian Empire. They will be city-states by themselves. So 2 larger city-states, Sparta and Athens. The map in the book, just to remember, they have the colors backwards. You need to make sure you switch the colors. Athens is actually in the green, and Sparta is actually in the orange. All right, Greece under Pericles will be your Athenian statesman, and he will bring Athens to its height. He's somebody who pushes for democracy and direct involvement in voting and all citizens participating. He will also grow their navy. He will grow their education, their agriculture, a very prosperous time. This is also the same time where they're going to be getting into the Peloponnesian Wars, which is Sparta versus Athens. Sparta jealous over the Athenians and their power, also worried they don't want one Greek city-state becoming too powerful over another one. They'll go to war. To pretty much sum it up, what ends up happening is through a plague, Pericles is going to die. Athens is surrounded. There's going to be some help from the Persians coming in to support the Spartans. They will defeat the Athenians. That kind of weakens the Greeks. The Persians are kind of in there. Philip II of Macedonia, which is just in the northern area, he considers himself a Greek. The Greeks kind of don't look at the Macedonians as full Greeks. And so he comes in, takes over Greece, 359 to 336 BCE. He will be assassinated. His son Alexander will take over, and he will go and conquer the Persian Empire, making his way over to India, conquering Egypt, setting up the great city of Alexandria as a city of education and also a major port city. And of course, Alexander will die at the age of 32. Here is the expansion of Alexander's empire. Here is your timeline of Alexander's empire, again by the age of 32. When he dies, it will be broken up into 3 areas, and this will become your Hellenistic world. It's where the culture of Greece is spread throughout the area, their architecture, their arts, their literature, their areas of math and science, philosophy will be spread throughout what was the Persian Empire, and then of course down into Egypt, and of course the areas of Greece. Here is the area broken up. This is the major part of the Persian Empire that gets broken up. You'll have an area of kind of part of Palestine and Egypt, and then of course Macedonia, which will be covering most of the Greek city-states area. All right, patterns of Greek and Roman history, moving on to Rome. All right, the Roman Republic, the Punic Wars, 264 to 146 BCE. That will be against Carthage, the Empire of Carthage that was in parts of North Africa, even over covering parts of Spain. The whole reason that they're going to fight against them, which are the Phoenicians, they are going to fight against them for grain. Grain was one of the most important parts of, or the staple for the Roman diet, and they're going to be needing land. The geography of Greece and Rome, extremely rocky, mountainous. The terrain for growing grain was not very good. That's one reason why they're going to convert to trying doing grapes and olives, even though that's strenuous on their farmers, because it takes at least a good 5 years to get a good yield in that. And so the money lost in that is difficult if you can survive the cost. Hannibal, a key figure in the battle against Carthage. The Romans will go over and defeat Carthage. Hannibal was the son at the time of the emperor, and so he's going to want to go and seek revenge against Rome. He makes his way up to, I'll just show you really quick, we'll go back. He makes his way, all right, over to Spain. He's going to go up through the Alps and make, pretty much wreak havoc through the Italian peninsula. It's not until Rome decides to go ahead and attack Carthage that he goes back. He will be defeated. They put salt around the grounds and hurt their agriculture, and eventually they're going to burn down their city and destroy it. And then they will take that area. So Rome will gain Sicily, which was a fertile area for growing grain. They're going to gain most of North Africa for growing grain as well. One reason why, if you look at this area today, it's not as fertile, because the Romans destroyed a lot of the ground there with a couple hundred years of just growing their grain there on the land. Okay, at the beginning they had the Roman Republic. When they first settled in Rome, there was a monarchy. They defeat the monarchy, and they say they don't ever want that system again. They'll have the 12 tables. They'll set up their republic with their senate and their consuls and their assembly. Through time, you'll end up having some civil wars. Julius Caesar is going to come to power, and that is going to end the republic. You'll then have the empire. You'll have Augustus Caesar, Julius Caesar's son, after he's assassinated. You'll then have Marcus Aurelius during the time of the Pax Romana, which you will have about 200 years of peace and prosperity to around about 180 CE. That'll pretty much be the height of their empire. You're then going to have 5 bad emperors that either were ruthless in their rule or just were incompetent. You'll have Diocletian, who splits the empire in 2. And Constantine will be your emperor over in the eastern part, which is where you'll have the eventual Byzantine Empire, and he's going to convert the Roman Empire to Christianity. All right, here's the beginning of our republic, and the outskirt of it in 117 CE. Here's the split: Diocletian, eastern half, western half. All right, Greek and Roman political institutions. Your polis, which is your citizenship. Very important. Citizens were an extreme part of the Roman society and the Greek society. Your upper landowning elites would be your citizens, of course, males. Your types of government: monarchy, aristocracy, oligarchy, direct democracy. Direct democracy coming from Greece, meaning the people. Your oligarchy, it's a state ruled by a small group of citizens. Rule is based on wealth. Ruling group controls military, practiced in Sparta for about 200 years. Your aristocracy, state ruled by nobility. Rule is hereditary and based on land ownership. Social status and wealth support rulers' authority, practiced in Athens. I'd make sure you check this out in the PowerPoint. Get a full understanding of monarchy, aristocracy, oligarchy, and direct democracy. As mentioned earlier, Rome's government under the Republic, you'll have the Senate, the consuls, and the assembly. Law codes established, the 12 tables. That's one thing Rome's going to focus on is their laws versus Han China, who would focus upon their bureaucracy. That's one of the comparisons the book makes. You've seen it in your quizzes. You also could see it in your writing as well. All right, religion and culture. The Pantheon, Zeus, Apollo, Neptune, Mars, Venus. Your mystery religions. You're going to have your Greek mythology. It will also be adopted by the Romans. Change the names. Personality is pretty much the same. One thing to note: this is more of a mystery religion than it is something that involves a lot of spirituality and a lot of life questions answered about the afterlife. So there's a lot missing from it. A similarity, China was missing a lot of its spirituality as well. You had Confucian philosophy. Obviously Greece and Rome, more so in Greece, you're going to have your philosophy there. Your government, Rome will be known for their engineering. Some of your philosophers would be Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. Your Stoics, looking for that inner moral independence that they have. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, I'm not going to read them. Again, I would check these out. Just get a brief history of who they are. You're probably not going to see them on the AP exam. Religion and culture, your sciences, Ptolemy, who was Roman, was an astronomer, a mathematician, and a geographer. Pythagoras, who was Greek, was your philosopher and obviously known in geometry. Literature, you did have some women involved in literature. Some of them were involved in poems, being a poet. Poetry, though, was not the major form of their literature. They were more involved with, obviously, their philosophies, but also their plays, with comedy and drama. Specifically, your epics that were involved will be part of your literature. Your plays, again, a huge part. You'll have Sophocles, who has a role of a psychological view of some of the people. We had a warm-up that involved comedy. It involved the soliloquy of making fun of where the Romans were at the time. So we get comedy, we get drama, we get plays from the Greeks and the Romans. And of course our arts, this is something important to understand. The Greek art was more free-flowing. You had movement in people, you saw the wrinkles in their clothes, you would see people stepping or in the movement of throwing something, whereas, which was still detailed, whereas in Rome, you're going to have just detail. You're going to get more statues of people just standing still, not moving, but yet it is extremely detailed. You just lose the movement of the body. That was something more focused on in Greece than in Rome. Economy and society in the Mediterranean, agriculture, I mentioned this earlier with their geography, very poor soil throughout Greece and even throughout the Italian peninsula. You'll have market farms, which are commercial. This is one thing that gets established a lot during the Roman Empire in North Africa, where they're going to grow the grain and they're going to ship it back to Rome. It's going to sell in the marketplaces. Trade, obviously grain and luxury items. They are going to trade with Asia, specifically India and China. They'll trade through the Middle Eastern merchants. But one thing to note is that the Roman and the Greek goods were not as well made as they were in India and China. And so when selling those, they were viewed as less valuable. So it was either silver or precious metals or a lot of your goods in order to get just a little bit of, especially the silk or your China plates. Society, you did have slavery in these. Family still was a patriarchal family where males were more dominant. However, in Rome, women were given a lot more rights and a lot more freedoms than they were in any other area during this classical time. Han China is going to give some freedom to women, but again, not as much as the Romans would give women in their freedom. Here's your trade routes within the Mediterranean. Even though they had a lot of contacts, more so than Han China, and they're going to travel further than Han China does, there's still an intense network of internal trade going on within the Mediterranean. And here are your trade routes during the classical age. Obviously, you can see your sea routes in Asia, Southeast Asia. You have your Silk Road in the red right there, the Mediterranean roads. You are going to have some camel routes in North Africa that occur. There's a lot of heavy trade in the eastern part of Africa during the classical time. Here's another trade map. I would look at this online, the PowerPoint, and get an idea of what items were located where for trade. It could always be helpful on an essay on the AP exam, knowing what items were where. That's points of evidence for you. Okay, and towards the fall of Rome, a complex legacy. All right, obviously when Rome falls, as you learn about in chapter 5, it completely falls. Unlike Han China, who doesn't necessarily revolve the Han Dynasty, but they do revive their culture, their bureaucracy, their government, their legacy continues on. Rome is going to die out. Eastern part will keep it, but they're going to change into the Byzantine Empire and be affected a little bit differently that we'll study. And the western part really reverts back. They lose a lot in that aspect. And where their legacy is going to be kept on is almost in here in America, where we look back upon their government and what they did, and we took a lot of those things. And so there's a lot of comparisons. And of course, we worked on some of those in class as well. And that summarizes the classical civilization in the Mediterranean, Greece and Rome.